evening. Welcome to First Take. Carrie Champion and Skip Bayless in studio. Stephen A. Smith still in Charlotte. I was on the Twitter and saw that you were speaking to the kids last night. How'd it go?
It went well. Stevie A love the kids, and they love him.
Did they miss me, though?
More importantly.
They never miss you, but I do try to get them to support you, Skip Bayless. I truly do.
Yeah, I don't think you have to try, but go ahead.
All right,
yes.
Gentlemen, coming up on the show today, Vikings reversed their decision to activate Adrian Peterson in the middle of the night. Is there more pressure on the league to address Panthers' Greg Hardy and the 49ers' Ray McDonald? We'll get to that in just a few minutes, but let's get to this. The Vikings did make the announcement early Wednesday morning, about a day and a half after initially deciding that Peterson could play with the team while the legal process played out. Peterson is charged with a felony for using a wooden switch to spank his 4-year-old son. The Vikings came under heavy criticism for their initial stance. Several sponsors responded by either suspending their deals with the Vikings or severing ties with Peterson. Here is a statement. While we were trying to make a balanced decision yesterday, after further reflection, we have concluded that this resolution is best for the Vikings and for Adrian. These are the owners of the Minnesota Vikings. We want to be clear. We have a strong stance regarding the protection and welfare of children, and we want to be sure we get this right. At the same time, we want to express our support for Adrian and acknowledge his 7+ years of outstanding commitment to this organization and this community. So we ask this question after it's all said and done. Skip Bayless, just before 2 a.m. in the morning, they made this announcement. Do you believe that this is the right move?
I do, obviously. And Stephen A. and Carrie, I said on this show on Monday and Tuesday, the National Football League cannot allow Adrian Peterson to play football for the Vikings on Sunday in New Orleans. And I believe, this is just Stephen A., my educated guess, that the commissioner, Roger Goodell, with heavy input, I'm guessing, from his new female board of advisors, let me say, influenced Ziggy Wilf, obviously the owner of the Vikings, to back off his decision of Monday to let Adrian Peterson play after sitting out the one game last Sunday, let him play again this Sunday. Now, obviously, the Vikings got blown out in that home game last Sunday, 30-7 by the New England Patriots. The Vikings are in the business of entertaining fans by winning football games. But we all know that the Vikings and the National Football League are, bottom line, in the business of selling advertising. And I thought the first significant shot got fired on Monday, or maybe it was, let's say I'm losing days, Tuesday, by Radisson Hotels, who are based in the Minneapolis area. And they said, we are going to suspend our limited sponsorship. We know that their banner hangs behind the podium during Vikings news conferences. And then I thought yesterday the hammer fell with the Anheuser-Busch statement that Anheuser-Busch, as one of the primary sponsors of the National Football League, is quote-unquote disappointed and concerned, and that they are not yet satisfied with the action so far taken by the National Football League. And I thought it was very significant. The NFL responded to that statement briefly, but they did respond. They did not ignore it. They did not try to discount it. They said, you're right, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but they said, we will do whatever it takes going forward. We will do more going forward. I think we're showing that statement right now.
Yep.
And Stephen A., I'm going to remind you, Anheuser-Busch is halfway through a 6-year, $1.2 billion deal with the National Football League. That hit home, which was followed up by concerns voiced by McDonald's and Visa and Campbell's Soup. And you mentioned Nike pulled its Adrian Peterson merchandise, I think, just in the Minneapolis area. But I'm thinking maybe nationally they're also leaning toward pulling their Adrian Peterson material. So the bottom line is that the bottom line of the NFL has been more threatened over the last 2 or 3 days than it ever has in the history of this league. which prompted Roger Goodell to move Adrian Peterson, I'm thinking it was his influence, his suggestion, onto something I'd never heard of, called the exempt list. I don't know what it is. Maybe you know, Stephen A.
I tweeted that. I go, what exactly
what
is this list?
I don't know. I've never heard of it, but maybe they sort of had to create a place to place Adrian Peterson. And he will get paid the bulk of his $11.8 million salary. I don't have an issue with that. But I did have an issue with his playing football until his case is resolved. And obviously, the news of a second incident in the past involving Adrian Peterson with what I would characterize as child abuse did not help this situation and again, pushed the Vikings and the NFL to say, enough. What took you so long?
Well, first of all, let's get with the exempt list first. If my understanding of it is correct, the exempt list comes into play simply because the Vikings didn't want to flat out cut or waive Adrian Peterson, because then he would be free to be picked up by somebody else. They have to pay him, but at the same time, he's prohibited from being involved in any and all team activities. Yet and still, he's their property in the event that this case gets resolved and he can ultimately come back to them. Baltimore obviously didn't care that much about Ray Rice, because Ray Rice is not the same as Adrian Peterson. He's not considered the best running back in football, and he's somebody that obviously they deemed they could afford to lose. Whereas Adrian Peterson, the Vikings mentality is that while we understand that we can't play him and he can't be involved in the team right now, once this issue is resolved, we certainly don't want the possibility of him ending up playing for somebody else in a different uniform. That's point number one. Point number two, to get directly to the question, I certainly support the Vikings and the NFL in this move. I think it was inevitable. I think it's something that had to happen in light of the sponsors coming into play and really pulling their advertising dollars. Their mentality is very, very simple. We're not going to tolerate this. I find it ironic that it's Anheuser-Busch, a beer company, a beer distributor, somebody involved in the world of alcohol, because when you look at a preponderance of things that have transpired over the years, certainly, and at least in some cases, alcohol had something to do with that. Go back to the days of Leonard Little or Dante Stallworth and others. Individuals were killed. Alcohol was involved, and we never heard much from the beer companies at that particular moment in time. So I find it a bit ironic to see them sticking their nose into this, but that does not make them wrong for doing so. We understand that at this particular juncture, at this particular moment in time, everybody should be incredibly concerned, because when you're talking about the well-being and the welfare of a child, that is as defenseless as it gets in our society. As I've said on many occasions, Skip, over the public airwaves, whether it be television or radio or beyond, you can sit there and find serial killers that are incarcerated for the rest of their natural lives, and they would have a problem with somebody who harms kids. People who harm kids in any way are considered just the dregs of our society. So Anheuser-Busch speaking up, along with McDonald's and others, intimating that they may end up doing the same. I definitely think it's the NFL seeing the handwriting on the wall, and it's a reminder that indeed we can all promote and provoke change. If you have the power to affect somebody's bottom line, that's how you make things happen in our society, in this culture. That's what Anheuser-Busch intimated with its actions. That's what other sponsors have intimated with threats of their actions. That is what the NFL is responding to. Nobody deserves cookies and milk here, as if they're just doing the right things out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they recognize bottom line is going to be affected. That's what's going on here. We understand it. We accept it. We embrace it, because in the end, it's all about the well-being of a child in this particular instance.
Okay, I don't want to dwell on this point, but you raised it. You're fully aware of the many times I've expressed on this show my issues with alcohol and how it damaged my childhood home.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to separate my personal feelings toward alcohol from the Anheuser-Busch statement of yesterday, because I do respect that company as a company. And part of that statement was that Anheuser-Busch is not yet satisfied with the league's handling of behaviors that so clearly go against our company's culture and moral code? Well, again, I have issues with alcohol, but I do not have issues with Anheuser-Busch's company and moral code because I respect it. So, Stephen A., I think we have to separate those two issues here, that this is a respected company that sells it's product to men and women, and yet we have other sponsors, McDonald's, Campbell's Soup, Visa, they're all coming along too. So let's, you know, it's interesting because this is cutting across a lot of lines here. We have women, and I saw a stat that 85% of that women influence 85% of purchasing decisions related to disposable income. Yeah. Okay, that's a powerful stat to me.
Sure.
But remember, you're also bringing in here with the Adrian Peterson issue mothers and fathers with kids. So you got that going on. So it's not just domestic abuse here. We're also dealing with child abuse. So now we've cut across all kinds of lines that would affect advertisers.
Well, Skip, I respectfully disagree. I'm not trying to denigrate Anheuser-Busch per se. I'm not trying to question whether or not they're a legitimate, respectable company. I in no way mean to imply that. I'm simply talking about the fact that they're a beer company, okay? And they're speaking about this. We've got drunk driving issues all over the place.
Sure.
We have NFL players
those are other issues
that have taken the life of individuals, and alcohol was involved. I'm simply pointing out that although we are all sensitive to anything that involves the welfare of a child, I find it a bit ironic that a beer company would speak up about it. Well, and I'm standing by that statement, and I'm not flinching.
Okay, well, Arian Foster tweeted about that, just for the record. It was profound. I thought it was an interesting tweet.
He made a good point. He said alcohol is just as dangerous, some could
say. That's all I'm saying.
As domestic abuse. It can be just as damaging.
Let's include something here. The NFL Players Association was informed of the Vikings' decision to place AP on this commission exempt list. They discussed his options regarding potentially challenging the team's decision. Peterson chose not to. He is not going to fight this. Okay. He has though, let me just add this, he has spoken out on Instagram and Twitter by posting Bible verses each time a decision has been made. That's his way of responding without responding.
Are you okay with that?
I think he believes he's being vilified, and he wants to respond appropriately. If I were to read into the messages, it's to say, I'm having a hard time understanding what's happening, but I know that I can get through it. I'm built for this. So he is now watching and very well aware of what people are thinking of him. And he's being very cautious as to how he responds.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I think the one thing about it, I think that we need to entertain the possibility that Adrian Peterson, in his own mind's eye, might be conflicted here from this perspective. There is no question that what we saw in terms of the pictures was abusive. That's why the words child abuse come into play. I see slash marks all over a kid's body, on his legs, his arm, his back, whatever the case may be. That's my definition of child abuse. Clearly, a lot of people shared that sentiment that I have, because otherwise he wouldn't have been indicted. Okay, so we understand that part. But you also have to understand that Adrian Peterson may very well be sitting at home right now saying, damn, I messed up because of how I elected to discipline my child. So it's one thing to be called to the carpet for that. It's another thing to be paraded all over the airwaves and be labeled a child abuser and be indicted on these charges when half the nation probably agrees with him that he had a right to parent his child. He might have just crossed the line. So that's how he's thinking. I think it looks like abuse in terms of this particular instance. So does Skip. So does you, Carrie. Yeah. So does a grand jury, evidently, that indicted him. But there's a lot of, I'm going to say this again. I'm on the radio yesterday, on my show, Mad Dog Sports Radio, Sirius XM. Half the people up in there, and half of them were women, were calling up saying he was a bit excessive. He was wrong. But to be indicted for trying to discipline your child, they had a problem with that. So this nation right now It's a debate. There's no debating Ray Rice. But in the eyes of this nation, there are a lot of people that are debating it right now, which is why I've sat up here over the last couple of days literally telling you, I don't know what to say. Because half the nation is saying, who the hell is anybody else to tell me how to parent my child? It's just a tough thing right now.
But don't those people who call in agree that when you see those slash marks, that was too far?
Yes, they all agree that it was too far, every one of them. But what they're saying is, Skip, there were times as parents that some would say they went too far. And then you let them know they went too far, and then they don't do it again. But they weren't indicted.
Yep.
That's the issue that everybody's having. Nobody's disputing that Adrian Peterson went too far. Nobody's disputing that. But what they're saying is, if you went too far because you were trying to discipline your child, then you get called to the carpet for it and be done with it, as opposed to being indicted and in danger of not only losing your career, but your livelihood because of it. I look at it as a 4-year-old kid. So there's no reason that should have ever happened. But you have a lot of parents out there that are saying he made the mistake and that should be that. I don't know what to think. All I'm doing is telling you this is what I'm getting from a whole bunch of parents out there. White, black, Hispanic, don't matter.
So, bringing it back here to Kerry, yesterday you were ambivalent about whether he should play or not. Today you're okay with him not playing.
I'm okay. I'm definitely okay with the decision. You know what? And it was arguably the right thing to do for him as well. He whether he believes in it or not, you don't want to see a player, a person accused of child abuse, and then we know he has another case, and then he's out on the field playing. It just sends the wrong message. And so
you came around after.
Yeah, I just after thought. It's one of these things you can't, for me, make an immediate decision. You have to give it some thought, and I gave it some thought, and I think it's right. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen A.
Some things are not about a message. I've grown. To be honest with you, with all due respect, and I totally agree with you, Kerry. You're not wrong in anything that you're saying, but I'm sort of getting tired of what sends the right message and what doesn't. What's right or wrong? Forget the message part. What's right or wrong? What's right is that Adrian Peterson, his life is on the line right now. This boy could be thrown in jail because of what he did to his son. You don't need to be playing football. You really need to focus on this issue right now. The hell with what the right message is. Because when we get focused on the right message, we seem to be caring too much about what other folks think, when we should be caring about what's right, what's wrong. The right thing to do is he shouldn't be playing.
He shouldn't be playing, but he tried to say he was going to be able to find some type of solace out on the field. But that's not the case here. He didn't need to be on the field.
But today,
go ahead.
No matter how much Adrian does believe in his Bible or his old school parenting methods, today he is not fighting this, which is significant. He has said through his agent that he's okay with being placed on the exempt list. So I think that's a significant message move by Adrian Peterson.
All right.
You're right.
The Vikings say he cannot return until he resolves his legal issues. The next step in this particular case is that a preliminary hearing will happen on October 8th. Again, he faces up to 2 years in prison and a fine if found guilty. Well, Panthers head coach Ron Rivera deactivated defensive end Greg Hardy for Sunday's 24-7 win over the Lions. Rivera defended his late decision to make Hardy inactive by saying the climate has changed in the NFL and the team has to, quote, get this right. Hardy was convicted July 15th of assault on a female, his ex-girlfriend, and communicating threats. He is appealing the ruling. And in the meantime, the Panthers have not said what they will do exactly with Hardy moving forward. Skip, we ask you this question before we even talk about what the NFL should do. What do you believe the Panthers as an organization should do?
Kerry and Stephen A., I thought it was shameful that Greg Hardy was allowed to play in week 1. And I think it is still shameful, even more shameful, that this organization, by all that we've heard, is considering allowing Greg Hardy to play in week 3. Now, remember, for our viewers out there who have not been closely in touch with this case, he was convicted of domestic violence. And if you read the police reports and her testimony, it was some ugly, ugly stuff that went down. And he is now appealing. So the legal process in North Carolina allows him to do that, and it has not officially run its course. but he was convicted. And I'm convinced, Stephen A., that the only reason he didn't play this past Sunday was, do you remember the video we saw of Jerry Richardson, the owner,
crying
as he was being honored at an event at which he had to speak? I think he felt ashamed that he had to address this situation. He felt it necessary to address the situation, and he couldn't get the words out. He broke down because it's such a sorry, shameful situation for him. And I'm convinced that he was the one who said, hey, I can't stomach this anymore. I can't watch Greg Hardy play for my football team Sunday. Then we heard from Ron Rivera that, well, we're reconsidering that. And now I have to throw it out there after I was apprised of this new exempt list that the commissioner and his new female advisory board have sort of created. Maybe it's been out there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they created
well,
it.
I mean, I've never heard of it used before, but maybe.
No, I think someone sent me a list of CFB, what they have in it, and so I don't know if that's created.
But whatever, they're using it for this, and I like that because they're finding a way to discipline these players, or at least put them on ice until their situations play out. They're going to continue to pay, but they cannot play. And I'm fine with that. And in this case, Greg Hardy's, this should have happened from the start. And if I'm just guessing here, but I assume the commissioner, with heavy input from his new female advisors, would step in today or tomorrow or whenever it's going to be and say, enough of this situation, just like they just did with Adrian Peterson.
Wait, timeout. And I just want to confirm, you are absolutely correct, Skip. Bleacher Report is
they are reporting it? Okay.
That Greg Hardy is expected to be put on the Panthers exempt list.
Okay.
Go ahead, Stephen A.
Skip Bayless, my original thoughts weeks ago were different than what you just expressed. Simply because the attitude was Greg Hardy had categorically denied ever touching a woman, and then on top of it all, he was the one that made the 911 call. But then I thought about, okay, wait a minute. Was he convicted? Looked it up again. Yes, the district judge convicted him. He appealed to go to a jury trial, and that's going to be forthcoming. That's going to be revisited later on. But the bottom line is that he's been convicted in the state of North Carolina. Not to mention the fact, Skip, let's think about the very person that you brought up, Richardson, the owner for the Carolina Panthers.
Yep.
This is the same guy that when after Cam Newton was drafted, he said, do you have any tattoos? You know, remember those questions?
I do.
He said, do you hang out a lot? You know, he wanted to make sure that the standard of the Carolina Panthers being in the Bible Belt was upheld.
Yep.
And that somebody coming into his organization couldn't compromise that in any way. Now, you had the Jeremy Shockeys and others that have been on his team, and so all of those things raised eyebrows considering it was the owner, Richardson, we're talking about here. But when you heard about the questions that he was asking Cam Newton, and he was talking about being the face of a franchise, and he was talking about not sullying the brand in any way, then you look at Hardy, and you see the conviction. What else is there to talk about? Of course he should not play. Of course he should not be practicing. Of course he should be exempt from all team activities. And when you consider the fact that he's about to get paid $13 million, which is about $700,000+ per game, and you're not getting your money stripped away from you, if you're Hardy, then how has he been victimized by the NFL team he represents or the league he plays for? I don't understand it. To me, it's something that should have happened a long time ago because he had been convicted, because a judge said you have been found guilty, because that's on the books, and it doesn't even require that in order for the commissioner to step in and make a decision, in order for his respective team to step in and make a decision. As far as I'm concerned, there's a flagrant dereliction of duty on both of their parts because you have him sullying the brand, you have him sullying the brand of the Panthers as well as the NFL. You have them being in a position to do something about it, even if he had not been convicted, and then to have their position even more augmented and substantiated because there was a conviction on the books. And you combine that with the image that Richardson brought to Cam Newton's attention. Yep. It seems to me that this should have been done a long, long time ago.
which brings us back to Kerry's original question. What should the Panthers do? And a la the Vikings situation, these teams obviously want to win football games. Sure. And they obviously feel like if they did have Greg Hardy, who's, by the way, really good player, nobody disagrees with that they might have a little better chance of winning this week. And yet, Stephen A., that's why it's incumbent upon the commissioner in the exempt list to save these teams from themselves. Obviously, I'm sure there are some Carolina fans who just say, I don't really care what he did. I just want to win.
Yeah.
I just want to win our next. I want to go to 3-0. And so they would lean toward, well, okay, if the appeal hasn't played out yet, just let him play. We need him. You know, okay, I get that. But somebody bigger than this situation has to step in and say, nope, we are not going to allow this. And apparently, according to Bleacher Report,
yes,
that's about to happen.
Yeah, and again, just for clarification, we've been trying to work on this actual exempt list. It is a part of the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. We just don't know how long it's been in place.
Okay. I've just never heard of it being used,
before.
Utilized.
Now it is,
yeah.
And it's a bailout, so to speak.
Yeah, it is a bailout. I would agree. It's a catch-all category.
Let's talk about moving forward with Greg Hardy, and then we'll move on to another case. If his sentence is upheld, because he will be retried in mid-November, he could face up to 60 days in jail or 18 months on probation. On to another team that has to make some decisions. That is the 49ers. 49ers defensive lineman Ray McDonald was arrested late last month for hitting his pregnant fiancée, but has not been charged as authorities continue to investigate the matter. The 49ers have said McDonald will be allowed to play pending the completion of the investigation. So, the same question, but this time it is the 49ers. What should they do with McDonald?
Stephen A. and Kerry, this is a much trickier question. My gut feeling at this moment, knowing the little that I do know about the Ray McDonald situation, is that in the police report, she, the alleged victim, had visible injuries, quote unquote. To me, that is cause and was cause enough to suspend Ray McDonald, put him on the exempt list or whatever, until at least we find out if he will be charged, because he hasn't even been charged yet. And this is the slippery slope we're on with this case, Stephen A. That's my gut feeling. But clearly, you and I have talked for years about this, about rushing to judgment. Be careful that you don't leap to conclusions. Innocent until proven guilty, or in this case, at least until you're charged. But in the climate that we now find ourselves in, this era of enlightenment now, these days of enlightenment in the National Football League, Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, Greg Hardy, in that climate, to me, the 49ers should have said several weeks back, I'm sorry, Ray. And again, they're in the business of trying to win football games, but we're sorry. We have to put you on ice until we find out exactly what's going to come out of this case. Will you be charged? And then we will revisit if you're not charged. But in this case, if she had visible injuries, according to the police, I would say suspend him.
Well, first of all, I agree. But secondly, and more importantly, where I disagree is that I don't believe it's a slippery slope. Not at this moment in particular. With Greg Hardy and his situation going on, with Ray Rice having occurred, with Adrian Peterson going on as we speak, to me, it's a real easy decision for either the 49ers, the NFL, or both to make, to sit down Ray McDonald. It's just that simple. And when you consider the fact that you're not taking money away from them, what you're simply saying is that the kind of publicity that you are bringing to our franchise and to our brand is not something we want to tolerate. Now, if we're taking money out of your pocket, we are compromising your quality of life and your living based on things that have not been proven yet. So you would have a point to fight us on that tooth and nail if we are taking money away from you. But if you're not taking money away from him And you're simply saying you can't wear an NFL uniform and play in an NFL stadium on Sunday afternoons while this case is ongoing because of the shrapnel of criticism that we're getting because of the manner in which this whole fiasco has contributed to sullying our brand. But you're still getting paid at the same time we're saying that. You owe him nothing. You really, really do. You really don't. So as far as I'm concerned, you sit him down. There's nothing slippery about it. I will remind you, there's nothing more slippery than when the commissioner stepped in and suspended Ben Roethlisberger for 6 games before reducing it to 4, where he was never arrested, he was never indicted. Nothing happened to Ben Roethlisberger whatsoever. And the commissioner still suspended him just because he found himself in that situation and it became publicized.
Okay, but Stephen A., quick point of order. In Roethlisberger's situation, he had 2 accusations. There were 2 separate incidents involving the same sort of behavior. Right?
Did anything involve an arrest or an indictment?
No.
That's all I'm saying. Nothing involved in arrest, nothing involved in indictment. It was an accusation that was publicized. And because of that, Roger Goodell suspended him.
Okay, but it's almost that's falling into the conduct unbecoming category.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me. And the reason why it doesn't matter to me, because these guys are on the books. Ray McDonald's case involves the police.
Sure.
Greg Hardy's case involved the police and the courts.
Yeah.
Adrian Peterson's case has involved the police and now the courts because he's indicted.
Yeah.
And Ray Rice's case involved everything. Ben Roethlisberger didn't have that and got suspended without pay for at least a few games. These guys are getting paid, even when they're told to sit out. What's there to talk about? Don't see any slippery slope here. You're getting your money. Greg Hardy is getting to sit at home and collect over $700,000 a game.
Sure. Okay.
Adrian Peterson is getting his money.
He is.
What's there to talk about?
Okay, there's this to talk about. Let us say that the San Jose police decide tomorrow we couldn't find enough here to charge Ray McDonald. Now what?
Bring him back.
Just bring him back?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
Hold on. If you can't find enough to charge the man, then if you choose to suspend him, you can suspend him. But what I'm saying to you, Skip, is this. In the end, my only point is you don't need all of that to suspend them. If you didn't need it for Ben Roethlisberger, you certainly don't need it for these guys.
Okay.
You don't need, so it's not a slippery slope.
Okay, but this is, to me, because, not to get too deep here, but, again, police said she had, the alleged victim, had visible injuries, and we know in many, many domestic abuse cases, domestic violence cases, that sometimes she will not cooperate with the authorities. So is that going on here? I'm just throwing that out because you never know.
Wait a minute. It has nothing to do with this, Skip, because we're agreeing that they don't need to be playing. My point is that it's not a slippery slope. It's not complicated at all. It shouldn't be complicated for Roger Goodell. It shouldn't be complicated for the San Francisco 49ers. It shouldn't be complicated because they're getting paid.
Yeah, okay.
So what's the complication?
You're good?
I'm good. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually talking with our researcher right now because you brought up the question of this exempt list, and I wanted to see how many times it had been used in the past. And I'm being told that the Eagles did it in 2009 for Michael Vick and Jonathan Vilma in 2012. It's been in place. They put them on the exempt list.
The Eagles did as he came out of prison before he played?
Deontay said he's still looking up that information, but we're trying to figure out the particulars. But I'm saying it's been put in place and they've been using it before. So perhaps this is what we're going to start seeing more of.
I thought Vilma was just flat out suspended over Bountygate.
Nope,
but
he was on the exempt list, something that we knew nothing about or talked about.
All right.
From MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, it is Super Bowl 48 between the Seahawks and the Denver Broncos. The ultimate goal, baby. He steps up to the pocket on the blitz ball. Sailball's intercepted. And Chancellor.
Yes, we got it. The only people on the field who open is us. That's where you got to throw the ball. You was open. He hit you right between the numbers. Good catch.
It's picked up by the Seahawks.
Yeah. Go now. Come on now.
Holy catfish. Touchdown.
Nate. They think we're going to get scared of them. We're going to eat their heart.
Get your mind tuned in. Let's go be world champions.
Wilson fires inside, and Kirk makes the catch, spins out one.
Oh, what a great play. Oh, he's going to score.
That is going to do it. Your Seahawks, Super Bowl 48 champions.
All right, the Broncos will look for some revenge when they face the Seahawks on Sunday afternoon. Seattle is a 5-point home favorite over Denver, that according to Westgate Sportsbook. This information just out as well. The NFL and the NFLPA have officially agreed to a new drug policy, which means Wes Welker will be playing on Sunday. Stephen A. Smith, what do you expect in the Super Bowl rematch?
I expect another beatdown. That's what I expect. I've seen nothing from the Denver Broncos that tells me that they're going to be able to avenge what took place in the Super Bowl. They're going to be up in Seattle. That noise is going to be deafening. And on top of it all, the Seattle Seahawks are fresh off a loss to the San Diego Chargers. They've got attitude. They're a bit peeved at themselves and their lack of productivity this past Sunday. And I think they're going to take it out on the Denver Broncos. Now, obviously, the Denver Broncos have some weapons. I think Emmanuel Sanders is an upgrade from Eric Decker. I think Monty Ball, however, is a downgrade from Noshawn Moreno. I think you look at the Seattle Seahawks, you know what they're capable of doing defensively. Offensively, however, I definitely think they need to give the ball a beast mode. Marshawn Lynch. They're averaging about 157 yards per game, but this man only had 6 carries last week against San Diego. That is just pathetic. I don't know what the hell Pete Carroll and Pep Hamilton would think. I'm like, what's going on here? You simply can't have something like that happening. You have to make sure that if you're Pete Carroll, that Marshawn Lynch is getting the daggone football. He put the ball in his hands, let him run the football. But I just think that the noise, the environment, the confines, it'll be a bit too much for the Denver Broncos. I predict Seattle will win and win big in this game.
I completely and utterly agree with every word you just uttered. I cannot believe this spread is only in some places 4.5, and as Kerry said, up to 5 points. This should be a 10-point spread. This is, what are all your expressions you used about the Super Bowl? They got straight up punked.
Yeah.
Beat down,
yeah,
embarrassed.
And I must say, we just heard that sideline audio, which caught Richard Sherman yelling to his defensive mates over on the sideline late in the game. We gonna eat they hots. And they did. They ate it.
I don't know if I like your accent.
Well, I got to do Richard's Compton accent, right? Stephen A. I know it's pretty graphic reference, but I think they effectively
did that.
Yeah, they figuratively ate Denver's hearts. And you said, what was your term? Snatched them right out of their chest.
Yeah.
That's what happened. I don't think Denver has quite psychologically recovered from that. I know they played in the preseason and Denver did pretty well in that game, but this is going to be very different up in Seattle. It's a late afternoon start, at least in the East, but a usual start in Seattle. And here's my point. Despite what we saw happen in San Diego, I think Seattle is a little better than it was last year, because I think the offense is a lot better. I understand your Marshawn issues with Darrell Bevell and how they were handling that. I'm sure that will get corrected. And I think Percy Harvin in San Diego wound up in the doghouse because he fumbled a kickoff. But in their 3 touchdown drives in Seattle, it was just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Russell Wilson is playing at an extremely high level. Their play calling is at an extremely high level. Their creativity, Percy Harvin, even though he stepped out of bounds, which drove me nuts because I had San Diego in that game, but that 51-yard run it just took your breath away, which he's highly capable of doing. And then all of a sudden, Turbin got in the act and had a turbo drive, the middle drive, and then the last drive, San Diego had no chance. So my point is, look, what Phillip Rivers did to that defense was off the charts because he was under duress the whole day. He's bobbing and weaving and ducking and flipping it, little ducks up in the air that happened to hit perfectly to Antonio Gates. Phillip Rivers played an extraordinary game against an extraordinary defense, and I do not think Peyton, for all of his greatness, is built quite like that. So I think that they're going to have a really hard time. And, yeah, Seattle's going to be in a bad mood for this game.
What do you mean built quite like that?
There's no question about it. Correction, by the way, I didn't mean Pep Hamilton. I meant Darryl Bevell.
That's okay.
Hold on one quick second.
I'm glad you called out Pep Hamilton because I did too
Hold on one
yesterday.
second, Stephen A. What do you mean built like that? Why is he not built like that?
Peyton can't move like – see, Phillip Rivers has some athletic ability they're talking about in the pocket where he was ducking under people and doing a little sidearm. That's not Peyton's game. Peyton needs just a little bit of time, and I'm sure they're going to shorten their routes, quicken their throws, but I think they will put pressure on Peyton. And Stephen A., that new upgraded Denver pass rush featuring what's that guy's name from
DeMarcus Ware.
DeMarcus Ware. Don't be disrespectful.
W-H-E-R-E.
No, he was in Denver.
No, he's not. I haven't seen the pass rush that everybody thought we would see from both DeMarcus and Von Miller. I'm not sure about that.
I saw him applying some pressure the first 2 weeks of the season. DeMarcus Ware's in there. Skip, I wouldn't dismiss him like that. I really wouldn't.
I'm dismissing
I wouldn't do that. You know,
I mean, listen. You're out.
In the end, you're in Seattle. That noise, the kind of pressure that they're going to apply to Peyton Manning. To me, the only shot at this being a different outcome is if Monty Ball is something that we didn't think he was, and if Emmanuel Sanders really steps out and shows you what Eric Decker should have done last year.
Maybe.
I don't know if I'm going to see that in Seattle. If it were in Denver, it's different. But in Seattle, I just can't see it. I just can't see it.
I can't either. The only advantage Denver has, it's not a night game in Seattle. That's when they're really unbeatable.
That works in their favor. Okay. Yeah. Adrian Peterson has been put on the exempt commissioner's permission list. In other words, he has been suspended by the Vikings. They issued a statement saying that Peterson needed to resolve his legal issues before he could return to the team. His suspension is with pay. Peterson has a preliminary hearing on October 8th. Just by way of background, this exempt list, again, a special player status available to the clubs only in unusual circumstances. Our NFL analyst, Herm Edwards, hanging out with us. Do you believe that this is the right move?
Yes, it was the right move, and I thought they got it right the first time, to be quite honest, Minnesota. I've always felt this way. Personal conduct of players was very important to me, and I think I made players understand right away when I became a head coach, my moral compass is only going so far. And I understand things happen, but when your transgressions off the field become a distraction in our locker room, I got to remove you. I have to remove you because it becomes a distraction. In the National Football League, and we know it's football and we love football, it's a workplace. But now all of a sudden our workplace is cluttered with reporters trying to do their job to find out how my players feel about your transgressions off the field. So in other words, if you can't handle your business and your business comes across my desk and it has something to do with domestic violence, child abuse, whatever it may be, I believe in due process, but there's also this process. I'm calling you in and I'm going to look you man to man in the face and say, tell me what happened. And we're going to have a conversation and then I'm going to collect evidence. I'm going to exhaust myself to collect the evidence so I have enough in my brain to say, guess what? You're deactivated. You're not going to play. And that's how I've always handled those situations. And I think the NFL right now, when you look at our personal conduct policy, it's outdated. It needs to be more uniformed. And we've been an organization, the National Football League, the big powerful National Football League, the shield, protect the shield. Our conduct policy is like a flag.
Meaning?
It waves in the wind. And we react. When everybody says, oh, we better do this now. Oh, are you kidding me? Our league, we need to look at our policy and get it corrected and get it corrected right. Have a uniform policy so when these matters appear, we have something to say. You say it once, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But we can't be the flag. Can't do it that way. In leadership positions, you cannot be a flag. You have to stand for something. You got to believe in something. You can't just believe, well, as the wind blows and as the social media gets a hold of us, oh, we'll change our opinion again.
Yes.
This started with Ray Rice.
Sure.
Okay? That's leadership. Leadership, you exhaust your ability to collect information so you can make the right decision the first time. And it's all a trickle-down effect. This thing has been chaos for the last 2 weeks, and I'm tired of talking about it, to be quite honest.
All right. Stephen
Okay,
A.,
real
question?
quick, Stephen A., before you jump in.
Yeah.
Coach, you coached in this league a long time.
Yes.
Now we're looking at a first-year coach in Mike Zimmer, whom I knew from his time as a defensive coordinator in Dallas. How much more difficult was it for him, because arguably his best player is the one in question here?
Very difficult. There's no handbook for this. But Mike Zimmer, the man I know, has a fabulous moral compass.
He does. I agree.
Right.
And he'll live by that.
Yep.
And sometimes we lose sight of that because it's all about the game. And all. This is bigger than the game, ladies and gentlemen, to be quite honest, okay? What's happened to this league in the last couple weeks is bigger than football. And we have an opportunity to set it right, set policies in our league to say, if you're going to play in this league, your talent gets you in here. And we want to win games. And we want to sell tickets. We want to sell jerseys. But here's the deal. If you're on my football team, I will not allow certain things to happen. And if they happen, I'm taking you off the field. That's what players understand. That fining guys, I get all that. It's good for charity because they receive the money. But when you take them off the field,
Yep.
That's
you send a message to them. Because there's only 16 games in the National Football League, by the way.
All right.
Only 16.
Stephen A., in short, he's saying the National Football League has been consistently inconsistent. Your take? Was this the right move?
Well, it was definitely the right move, but for me, Coach, I'll go here. 85% of the victims of domestic violence are women. There's over 3.2 million cases a year, from what I'm told. Whether it be every 10 minutes or every 10 seconds, I'm not sure if I remember correctly, but a woman is abused. And over the last 2 years alone, there have been a litany of cases that have come before the NFL involving domestic abuse. All of them black men, by the way, which definitely raises my alarms as well. My question to you, Coach Herm Edwards, the NFL wasn't aware of anything that I just said prior to Ray Rice, prior to Adrian Peterson, even though that's child abuse as opposed to domestic abuse. But prior to Greg Hardy, prior to Ray McDonald, was the NFL aware of all of this before these incidences came about?
If not, shame on them, because they should be aware.
I guess what I'm saying is that there's no way on earth they weren't aware of it. So to me, if the average Joe out here is aware of it, the NFL is aware of it, particularly when some of their own players were involved, not just recently, but over the last several years, not to mention the 50 cases that Terry O'Neill, president of the National Organization of Women, alluded to when she talked about guys getting arrested and it, going up to the courts. If those facts were out there and everybody else knew, chances are the NFL knew. So what justification does the National Football League have, in your estimation, Coach Herm Edwards, for this stuff just coming about now, as opposed to it having been in place, whether it be the domestic violence policy, calling for the 6 games for a first-time offender, a lifetime ban for the second offense, whether it's all of this stuff with the exempt list and what have you? Why is it that all of this is coming into play now, as opposed to it being on the books years ago?
Only answer I can give you on that one, Stephen A., and it's a great question, is that it was not on their top 5 priority list. And obviously, that needs to be changed, to be quite honest, because I believe this, as we sit here and debate, there's a moral compass that we all have to live by. And I've always felt that way when I was a head coach. I made sure my players understood that. And to be quite honest, when I told players they weren't playing, I called the league up and told them, you do what you do, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get them now. I'm not waiting for the process. I got enough information that tells me my moral compass says this is not going right. It's not going north, it's going south. I'm not going to allow it to happen on my watch. And so if you're the National Football League, and I think right now they're shocked. They're sitting there trying to figure it out. A lot of smart people up there. But they got to figure this thing out. Because this has been, for a guy that has been in the league for 30 years, I was honored to be in the league, coaching and playing. It's an embarrassment for me to sit here the last week and a half to talk about players' conduct off the field, and we don't have a plan. And we send head coaches out there that have no idea. They send the head coaches out there and say, well, you deal with the media. And the owners and the management just kind of stand back and put the coach out there. Really?
It looks bad.
Coach,
yes, sir.
Skip, I'm going to say this last statement.
Yes, sir.
The players who have involved themselves in these acts, they are the ones to be held accountable for their actions as it pertains to any kind of abuse. I have no problem with that. But when it comes to what we've been talking about over the last 2 weeks, no, I'm blaming the NFL for that, not the players.
What?
Because let me tell you something.
Okay
if you had a policy in place, and 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, or whatever, it was dealt with head on right then. Because there were policies in place. There's nothing to discuss. I got news for you. It's a one-day topic. Ray Rice is gone. Adrian Peterson's gone. Greg Hardy's gone. Ray McDonald's gone. It's that simple. The reason why this story has spread on for weeks is because of the flagrant dereliction of duty involving the National Football League office. That's why it's being discussed. So let's make sure we understand the difference. The players deserve to be held accountable for their actions. But why this is a story that has stretched on for weeks, it is because of the inaction when it comes to dealing with those players. That is what has made this news. That is the reason why you have had to talk about this. And I, and Skip, and Carrie, and others have had to talk about this for weeks. Not because of the players. They're guilty of their actions.
Yes.
The NFL is guilty of inaction, which is what stretched the story.
I'll put a bow on it. And you're right. I agree. I agree, my friend. I agree. And here's the deal we say in coaching. When players are playing bad, you got two options. And here's the options. You're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And on both fronts, the National Football League, and I agree with Stephen A., they've allowed this to happen. They've allowed it to happen. Players want discipline. And once you give players discipline, guess what? They get it. They get it. But once your discipline is a flag and it kind of waves around like the wind and, well, we decided. No consistency. None.
Okay, so you're describing a National Football League that has always been reactive instead of proactive.
Yes, sir.
So what just happened that really made the commissioner react? Anheuser-Busch just happened, because we all know, and we talk every day on the show about how winning and losing in the National Football League is extremely important, but even more important to the National Football League are those advertising dollars. And once again, we're talking about a corporation that is halfway through a 6-year, $1.2 billion deal with the National Football League, and that corporation said, time out, NFL, and fired a big, loud shot over the bow of the National Football League by saying, hey, we're disappointed and concerned. We haven't seen enough action quite yet.
Yeah,
we
have the full screen.
Yeah, we have the full screen. Yeah. So, Coach, to me, that did it, man. Because for the first time, and I've been covering this league for as long as you've been playing in this league, even longer, and I can never remember the NFL's bottom line being threatened the way it was yesterday by Anheuser-Busch, number one, and then right in line came McDonald's and Visa and Campbell's Soup. Boom, boom, boom. And it's like, we're out, man, we're out. Okay, now you're on the exempt list, and you're on the exempt list, and you're suspended. Now they finally reacted because their bottom line got threatened.
Great. Go ahead, Stephen.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Skip this question. So in light of that, what does that say to you about your NFL? That this is what compelled them to act.
Are we surprised by that?
I'm not surprised by it at all.
I'm not.
But I'm asking you, but I'm not asking whether or not you're surprised. I'm asking, what does it say to you? How you, Skip, you have been covering the NFL for almost 4 decades.
Yep.
I am asking you.
Right.
How does that make you feel about your NFL today compared to what you have felt about it for decades?
I brought this up with Coach Edwards just before this segment began.
The whispering. Yeah.
Yes, we were talking about this, and I'm glad you brought it up, Stephen A. I'm going to turn to Coach here. I have covered this league for many, many years, and I've always been conditioned to accept that your players were playing a very violent game, and it was a gladiator-type sport, and that it encouraged behavior that was close to criminal on the football field. I know this sounded harsh to you, but I accepted how physical and violent this game had to be played to be won. And so I was conditioned to say, well, these are just football players, and they're going to do what they do. And I saw a stat this morning that since 2000, there have been 89 domestic abuse cases in the National Football League. Well, listen, now I want to go back to the 60s and the 70s.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, it would be hundreds of
reported,
seriously.
I'm sure, but yes.
And so many of us just accepted it. But what is the key difference today? Social media. Okay. It's everywhere. There are cameras. We could see, let's do Adrian Peterson. We could see the slash marks immediately because the picture is on everybody's phone.
Sure.
Immediately. We could see the video of Ray Rice. And when we saw the second video, it was staggering what we saw. Well, in the old days, we wouldn't have seen that video. And so much went unreported where I just accepted it's a gladiator sport. And I'm going back to ancient Rome. Okay. They chained up, or they put in, they caged up the gladiators during the week. They gave them their women and their food, and and then on Sunday they let them out to fight. Yeah. Okay. Well, it was close to that for me. I sort of accepted that's the way it is. Today, the world is not going to accept that. They're going to have to be civil and decent human beings out in society.
And why is that? Because you've been making this point all week long. Because we know better.
We know better. And the players are going to have to learn to know better if they want to stay eligible to play in today's National Football League.
You make a great point, and I agree with you and Stephen. But I also understand this. There's about 2,000 players. Most of the players get it right.
They do, and that's fair. That is fair.
Let's don't paint the big brush.
Fair.
Okay.
And there's a lot of smart people up in the league office, and there's a lot of great owners. Yeah. So let's don't paint them all the same brush. But the problem is, it's about our league, and I bled in that league for a long time, and I believe in that league. But the problem is now, social media, like you said, like Stephen H. just said, hey, if they didn't have that information. When you look at domestic violence, shame on them. Then really the game and winning games and making money was bigger than our moral compass. Okay. And maybe we all have to sit back now and reflect on this and say, hey, you know what, let's learn something.
But to your point, I want to add something. I'm glad you said that. I had an exchange with Torrey Smith, which was Ray Rice's former teammate, on Twitter, and he said it's about the man. It's not about the entire football league. Exactly. He didn't want us to paint a broad brush.
Exactly
he was very specific about that. And that's on just on balance, so that we're fair. Coach, thank you for weighing in. We really appreciate it.
I commute from Schenectady to Manhattan. It's about a 6-hour round trip, but it's cool. My family loves Schenectady, and I love books on tape. It's a lot of time to spend driving alone. On the other hand, Schenectady is really close to the highway, so...
Life is a long drive. Make sure your car is along for the ride. Mobile Super Motor Oil is formulated to help prevent sludge and protect against wear. Mobile Super, for long engine life.
Nearly 6 months after DeSean Jackson was released by the Eagles, some Eagle players are still unsure why he was let go after the most productive season of his career. Linebacker Michael Kendricks told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "I didn't see it coming at all. It's really none of my business, but I still ask the same question a lot. Why? Why would that happen?" Riley Cooper said, "For someone that's so explosive and so dynamic, it was surprising to all of us. We didn't know this was going to happen, but Chip said that it was a football move. We all had to respect it, and we all had to rally around and wish DeSean the absolute best." The Inquirer reported each of the 21 Eagles interviewed for this story believed something larger was behind Jackson's release than it being purely a football decision, as Coach Chip Kelly said in April. Stephen A. Smith, your reaction to this news about DeSean Jackson being released?
Well, it's refreshing because even though I think they're engaging in extreme PC, when it comes to them addressing this matter. They're addressing it in question form. They're being relatively vague. They're not being direct with what they're really feeling. And that is that DeSean Jackson got his behind railroaded out of Philadelphia. It's that simple. We heard a lot of stuff. We all know that I sat down one-on-one with him and talked to him. I've known DeSean Jackson for years, all of his years in Philadelphia. I covered him when I was reporting for the Philadelphia Inquirer, a columnist rather. I understand that DeSean Jackson at times could be a headache. I understand there were some questions about the company he kept. I understand there were some questions about the nightlife that he had on occasion and some things like that. But in the end, he showed up on the field. He produced under Chip Kelly, was a 1,200-yard plus receiver. He got the job done last year, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And you heard stuff that it was a football decision. That's utter nonsense. It wasn't a football decision. It was something far more than that, because if anybody could use DeSean Jackson, it's a Chip Kelly-style offense that could use a DeSean Jackson. What it says to me, with the players reacting the way that they reacted, Skip, and asking this question as the Washington Redskins get set to show up at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia this week, it seems to me that what they're saying is that there's no reason for this guy to be gone from this football team. And what that also says to me is that the distraction that they tried to paint DeSean Jackson as being when they were ultimately trying to let him go, it tells me that that wasn't true either. Because if it were true, then the players wouldn't be asking questions. They would know for a fact this is why he's gone, because in the coach's eyes, at the very least, he was considered a distraction. But they're not even willing to admit that. And what that says to me is that DeSean Jackson had a better relationship with his teammates than we were led to believe. It says to me that they wanted him more than we were led to believe. And it says to me that the justification for the Philadelphia Eagles for letting him go wasn't nearly what they tried to paint it as being, which tells me he was railroaded and shipped out of town. And I'm glad he landed in Washington.
Okay, I am too, but I'm not with you on your analysis of this. Help me out here. You said that you thought their comments were incredibly PC. I didn't think they were PC at all. 21 Eagles said,
we don't know why.
We don't know what happened here, and we don't really love it. You know, again, quote after quote I read where this is where I thought Chip Kelly would draw the troops together in the post-game locker room the other night and say, whenever, maybe Monday, and say, hey, guys, DeSean Jackson is gone. We're going to play him, but he is out of here. And I don't want to read any comments this week about DeSean. And clearly that did not, maybe it did happen and they rebelled against that proclamation from the coach. But here's my point, Stephen A. Big picture. Chip Kelly has faced two crises that could have split his team or even wrecked his team. One that we talked for days about was the Riley Cooper N-word controversy. And I'm still not sure how Chip Kelly got away with that one, but he did. And the team stayed together, and it won games together. And now, I'm with you, there's no doubt. He got rid of DeSean Jackson, who was beloved by his teammates and an extremely valuable weapon on that team. Now, he looks like so far he is adequately, if not even better, to replace him with Darren Sproles. But I got to tell you, if 21 players are still upset about it, still not sure about it, that would have potential to wreck this team this year, to tear it apart. And so far, so great, man.
Yeah.
Again, they had the bad first half against Jacksonville, and they were a little shaky the other night in the first half, but they have won impressively in 2 second halves. So clearly, the team is hitting on all second half cylinders. So Chip Kelly must be doing something right with his team, even though they're saying to me all the wrong things about DeSean being gone.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I still considered it PC because they weren't direct. They were just saying that we don't know why he's gone and we wish he was here, as opposed to obviously saying, you know what, the stories about him were not true and it was unfair for him to be gone. That's all I meant by that. It's no big deal. But I did believe they were PC. Point number two, let's not make this out to be more than it is from this perspective. Chip Kelly can coach. It's just that simple. When you talk about guys, I don't know how he made it through this, or whether it's the Riley Cooper fiasco or now with DeSean Jackson. I don't consider that a big deal. Skip, this is the National Football League. If your signing bonus ain't locked in, you're playing with non-guaranteed dollars. Your future is not guaranteed. One play could end your career. The money it can take away from you, etc., etc. It doesn't take much to incentivize an NFL player to go out there and perform to the best of his ability. Because in this league, the NFL, it is the no fun league when it comes to dollars and cents, because the money can be taken away from you in a heartbeat. So you don't have to be the ultimate motivator to get guys in line to do their jobs, because they're trying to get paid. And there's no 9-to-5 job out here that's paying them what they're going to get paid for playing a game of football on Sunday afternoons. It's that simple to me. So I don't think Chip Kelly deserves a cookie for that. The fact is, he can coach. He knows what he's doing. But in terms of incentivizing players, no matter how they feel, no matter how disgusted they may have been with DeSean Jackson's departure, Riley Cooper's inebriated racial epithets that he was throwing around at a country music concert, or whatever the case may be, in the end, when it's time to go to work, it's time to go to work. Yeah. Because if you're not willing to put in the work, they can replace you in a heartbeat, take your money away from you, and put somebody else out there to do it. Unlike baseball and basketball, where the contracts are obviously guaranteed for years and years to come.
I've told you again and again, in all my years around the National Football League, unity is an underreported and sometimes undervalued intangible in a locker room. You can't win without it. Teams have to pull together and stay together to win. Every winning team has high locker room unity. I can show you year after year. I can show you lots of teams that fell apart because they were split apart over some internal issue. And in this case, these were two threatening issues. You got to admit that. Riley Cooper, with the black leaders on that team, there were a couple days where Michael Vick saying, man, I thought I knew him, but I'm not sure. And we had DeSean on at the Super Bowl. We've had LeSean on, and they're all still a little.
They were touched by that.
Yeah.
I respect the fact that you've been covering sports for nearly 40 years. What I would ask is that you respect the fact that I've been covering sports for over 20.
I do.
And talking to these athletes, there are plenty of occasions where locker rooms were divided and guys didn't like one another. But when you say divide, let's be careful about this. We might not like one another. It might be divided in that respect. But it doesn't mean that we can't come together and get the job done.
Okay.
You and I both have worked in situations where we've had to find ourselves working in situations where we didn't necessarily like folks we were working with. But it doesn't stop us from doing the job.
No, I hear you.
And that's what it comes down to.
No, I'm talking about mutinous situations where entire teams,
sure,
where a large group, a majority of players mutinied against the head coach. In this case, I'm trying to give Chip Kelly credit here because I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And we know he can coach, but you have to also be able to motivate and to handle your locker room.
But I'm saying to you, it wasn't a big deal. Riley Cooper spewing what he spewed last year. Yeah, there was a lot of players that didn't like Riley Cooper, but they loved each other and they had no problem with Chip Kelly. So it wasn't that big of a deal. When you look at this with DeSean Jackson being gone, yeah, they don't like the fact that he's gone. But they're in a business where players are gone all the time. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is you view this Chip Kelly, and in terms of how he's dealt with these issues, you're thinking they're very, very big issues. Skip, it was a problem, but in essence, it wasn't a problem. I mean, it's one individual. DeSean Jackson being gone. It's one individual. Riley Cooper. That's not mutiny in the locker room.
Well, it could have been.
That's one guy that people have a problem with.
I thought it should have been
Kelly
mutiny,
overcome
but that's
that.
just me.
For what the issue was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see why.
But, hey, in this case, I expected every Eagle this week to say, hey, we've moved on from DeSean.
No, they don't understand.
That's not what they're saying.
They don't understand why that's happening.
Because they know he was railroading.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, he was.
That's what they say. It's safe to say Tony Romo played a complimentary role in Sunday's win over the Tennessee Titans, with DeMarco Murray and the Cowboys' running game doing most of the work. Romo threw for only 176 yards, but Dallas racked up 220 yards on the ground. Cowboys owner Jerry Jones says he's fine with Romo taking a back seat if that means they keep winning.
I'm probably the one that's standing right behind Tony and saying, yes, we like seeing that. When you can have that balance, and that's a word that's overused, balance, and the other day we had more of a lean toward the run, and we'll take it. That offensive line played lights out for us, but when you can have more of a balance, which means that you're not sitting there with a high ratio of passes by Romo, then I think we're seeing you have a better chance for your defense to be more effective, play less plays, better field position. All of it works together. And so the way we played Romo the other day fits me just fine and fits him just fine, and it's called winning, and that's what we're here for.
It's called winning. That's what we're here for. They're not here for the show, Skip. They're here for winning.
So he says.
We're putting the Dallas Cowboys on the hook. Do you expect less Romo moving forward, Stephen A?
That remains to be seen. I'm not sure. I don't trust Jerry Jones that he truly means that. I certainly don't trust Jason Garrett in assuming that he means that. But at the same time, these are not idiots. They're just unproductive football men. What I will say is that they have the second leading rushing attack in the NFL. DeMarco Murray's got, 285 yards rushing in the first 2 games of this season, averaging 5.6 yards a carry. To me, if there's ever an excuse to take the ball out of Tony Romo's hands and put it in the hands of somebody else, I would go with DeMarco Murray. It's just that simple to me. And by the way, Bryant has 14 catches for 158 yards in the first 2 games. So to me, yeah, you could give it to Romo to get it to Dez Bryant, but with DeMarco Murray running the football as effectively as he's running it, I think that's exactly what the Dallas Cowboys need. Number one, you're taking the ball out of Tony Romo's hands, so you're not exposing his back to the excessive amount of shots coming off the back surgery. DeMarco Murray was the 3rd leading rusher in all of the NFL the last half of last season. I think that works to their benefit. Plus, you're talking about ball control and moving the change, which doesn't expose this suspect defense, although it has looked impressive over the first 2 weeks, specifically the last 2 quarters. But you're not exposing this suspect defense to a lot of offenses. And I think that's going to help the team as well. So I'll take Jerry Jones at his word. It remains to be seen if he's telling the truth. Do I believe it totally? Hell no. But it is what it is at this particular moment in time. They've got the number 2 rushing attack, and they just won a game. So I'll take him at his word for now.
Since I don't curse, I'm going to say heck no. I'm going to give you a heck no on Jerry Jones.
I don't consider hell a curse word, but go ahead.
I'm kidding. I don't trust it. I'm sorry. I'm trying to trust my Dallas Cowboys. I love the formula I saw on the road at Tennessee, in which they rushed the ball 43 times. And do not discount the contributions of the 2 other backs. Joseph Randle and Lance Dunbar are pretty good, and they can spell the big guy, because I'm not sure the big guy, DeMarco, our guy on the show, he doesn't say much, but boy, he can carry that mail. I'm not sure he can last. He tends to get a little beat up, and I hope he does, because that's their formula for success. Here's my point about Jerry Jones, Dallas Cowboys. I got to the point last year where I thought Jerry crossed the line and became a little more interested in spectacular moral victories, as in close losses. See 51-48 Peyton over Romo at home at Jerry World, in which Romo threw for 506 yards. Stephen A., my fear is that when they are at home at Jerry World, and this week they're in St. Louis, so I don't have to worry about this, but when they're at home, I feel like Jerry wants to put on a little more of a show. Like there's a little more pressure, I feel like, and maybe it's unspoken pressure, it's just it's sort of between the lines pressure to put on a show by throwing the football. Because Tony Romo, when he gets hot, he can light it up. Unfortunately, it can also be 51-48 because the other quarterback's going to get the ball a whole lot too. I loved what I saw, because at Tennessee they ran it 43 times. He threw it only 29 times, and he threw for only 148. But I think Tony is just fine with that. Tony Romo, I think he's fine. He doesn't need to, like, I'm never sure Jay Cutler is fine with what happened the other night in San Francisco. I think Jay Cutler wants to put on his show. But in Tony Romo's case, I think he's like, fine. I'm happy handing off. If our offensive line is mauling them, which they were, as Jerry said, they were lights out on the run, blocking for the run. But keep the ball out of Tony's hands a little bit. As you said, keep him protected a little better. Keep him from throwing 3 interceptions as he did against San Francisco. Keep him from fumbling. Just hammer away and keep the defense off the field. The defense has been much better than any of us thought, certainly me, but it has helped that the time of possession on Sunday was in Dallas's favor. So I will believe it when I see it when they get back to Jerry
Look at
World.
Stephen A's face.
Right. Did I see you?
Right.
Did you yawn a second ago? I think you yawned.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. But it wasn't because of you, Skip. Because when you speak, when you articulate yourself, you're just so excited.
You are.
The problem is there's what you're talking about here. It's Jerry and the Cowboys. Of course, I yawned.
Well, they're going to win 10 games this year, so
boy.
just keep
And
on
the
sleeping
division.
on the
by
Dallas
default.
Cowboys.
And the division.
Keep on
according to
sleeping.
him. All right.
Although I must tell you,
I'm snoring at
I'm
them.
a little afraid of this kid named Austin Davis, this Rams quarterback.
You're concerned.
Walk on at Southern Miss, undrafted, and all of a sudden he goes to Tampa and wins. Is it possible he's going to beat my Dallas Cowboys?
Don't worry.
Austin Davis.
Don't even worry about it. Since drafting DeMarco Murray in 2011, Cowboys are 12-1 when he has 20-plus carries.
There you go.
There is.
Thank you.
There is the recipe.
Next question.
I know, we're done. 10 games this year. All right, this information just into us. Florida State coach Jimbo Fisher said on Wednesday's ACC teleconference that the school's considering punishment for Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Jameis Winston in the wake of a report that he jumped on a table at the student union and yelled an obscene phrase regarding women. He says it was not a good decision. You can't make certain statements that are derogatory or inflammatory to any person, race, or gender. You have to understand that. You have to be very intelligent about what you say because it matters. We are just now finding out this information, Stephen A., and just on balance, Deadspin first reported the incident, citing several tweets and witnesses who saw what happened. Apparently, the obscenity is a gag rooted in some type of internet meme, but nevertheless, to whom much is given, much is required. He is a Heisman winning trophy. He's a Heisman winner. He's a quarterback at Florida State. He can't be behaving that way is what Jimbo Fisher is trying to relay. What is your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction to it is that I think that Jameis Winston should not be playing this weekend against Clemson. Obviously, there's a lot more facts to be told, and we understand that just because somebody goes into the blogosphere and say something about you, that very rarely tells the whole entire story. But in the end, in the case of Jameis Winston, you have to take the totality of everything into consideration as it pertains to who he is, what he has experienced, and what he's presently experiencing. The accusations of sexual assault, that case being dropped from a legal perspective, but still being investigated by the school because obviously a civil lawsuit could be coming down the pike. That's something to take into consideration. The pellet guns when he first arrived at the school, the stealing of the crab legs from the supermarket. This guy has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. And to know this and to know that the school is presently in the eye of the storm, because of what the accusations were against him, you would think that he would know better than bringing any kind of potential unwanted attention in his direction. And the fact that he seems incapable or oblivious to that reality really highlights and displays the significant level of immaturity he continues to display. And because of it, you got to put him in check. If NFL players that receive game checks and are still going to get their money, if what resonates with them most in the eyes of all the critics and aficionados is actually sitting them down, then is it the same applicable to a college football student? I would think so. So I think that in the case of Jameis Winston, he needs to sit out this Saturday. He doesn't need to play because he needs to learn that if you don't know how to act while representing this football program and this institution, you're going to be dealt with. I think that's the message to send, and I think it's the appropriate direction to go in.
Completely concur. Jimbo Fisher says they are considering punishment. They shouldn't consider very much longer. there's no way he can play after what he did, even though they have a fairly big game, even though, what are they, a 20-point favorite over Clemson at home, but it's still a big conference game. I don't care. This kid still doesn't get it. So he stood on a table, even though this is an internet meme gag.
Right.
Stood on a table. You are the reigning Heisman Trophy winner.
Right.
You stand on a table in the student union in front of many students.
Sure.
All of whom
know who you are.
Have a phone in their hands and a Twitter account.
Sure.
And you scream some obscene phrases that they all record and tweet about. What are you thinking? No, seriously, what are you thinking, Jameis Winston? It's been one little incident after another, and there was a really big one that you brought up. There was a sexual assault, and then again, we know that they decided not to pursue the charges, but Title IX says, nope, we are continuing to investigate, and we have not heard the end of that. So you have that hanging over you, and it's the crab legs. Remember the soda? He went in, got a soda cup, and filled it up, and didn't pay for it, and walked out. Those are little things that add up to lots of big things.
Right.
If nothing else, I'm afraid Jameis just cost himself some draft money, because now the NFL is going to say, really? Well, now there's a whole litany of problems here with this young man. Maybe he could be an ongoing problem for a National Football League, and it might cost him a couple of draft slots, maybe more than a couple. So, Stephen A., please explain what goes through the head of a young man who's had so much success on the football field and could have he could have a baseball career or a football career, and you're still threatening your livelihood and your future with that?
There's an answer to that question. In terms of your direct question to me, Skip, is what goes through his head. Clearly, nothing but air. Nothing but air.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. And let's put it all in its proper context if we really want to be real about this. Jameis Winston has a mother, he has a father, he has friends, he has a head coach in Jimbo Fisher, he has supporters. He's slapping them all in the face.
Yep.
With his juvenile conduct. In the grand scheme of things, is this a big deal? No, if it's a standalone issue. The problem is that it reminds you of a litany of other things his name has been associated with that are not such little deals, little things. They're big things. Sexual assault accusation is a big thing. Title IX mandating a school investigation by Florida State is a big thing. And when you couple that with the pellet guns, with the crab legs. Well, I got news for you. Yeah, it might have been crab legs and all that stuff. It's not a big deal, but in some people's eyes, stealing's a big deal. What are you, a klepto? Is it a kleptomaniac? I mean, what are you doing? So if all of these things are the kind of things that's associated with his name, and you represent so many people by just being who you are, what you're essentially saying is you don't care who you're representing. You want to do what you want to do. And if you're going to have that attitude, then is it beyond the pale for people, particularly with this Title IX investigation, to parlay that kind of thinking into saying, clearly he's a guy that thinks he could do whatever he wants?
That's correct.
He's not thinking like that.
Yep.
And that's a problem.
And finally, I got to reemphasize this last point, as Kerry brought it up to start this conversation. He's still under investigation for a sexual assault, and you stand on a table in the student union and you use obscene language directed toward women?
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Yep. No regard at all. Immature, as Stephen A. just mentioned. We leave it there. ESPN.com has released their Week 3 NFL Power Rankings. After the loss to the Chargers Sunday, the Seahawks fall to the number 2 spot, and the 2-0 Broncos are atop of the list. Bengals, Eagles, Patriots round out top 5. Bayless, take a good look at this. Focus. What's your take?
I can't, my eyes cross when I look at the top of this list.
You don't like it? What's your take?
Stephen A., I don't want to be too critical of our experts here at ESPN, but this is laughable to me. I know they're just going straight on records. Denver's 2-0 and Seattle's now 1-1.
Not really.
Well, hey, Seattle.
Cardinals on there.
Seattle, that's a fair point. Seattle is still in a league of its own. It took an extraordinary performance by Phillip Rivers and Antonio Gates, and it took 118 degrees in some spots on that football field in San Diego for the Chargers to pull off a monumental upset. Even though I think the Chargers are going to be very good, it was still a monumental upset. And I have to point out, Denver in the second half against Indianapolis in the opener struggled. Denver had a hard time with Kansas City last week, barely held off Kansas City at the end of that game. The same Chiefs who in their home opener got blown out by Tennessee. So how can I read into it that suddenly Denver's better than Seattle? Seattle is better than it was last year because Seattle's offense is much more explosive with Percy Harvin. They have more depth on offense, and I think their defense will slowly but surely be almost as good as it was last year.
Are you sitting down?
Uh-oh.
You're going to... No.
He's going to agree.
I'm about to say something that's going to shock the mess out of you. Are you ready? You know who should be number one on the power rankings this week? The Cincinnati Bengals. The power rankings, Skip, are just about what's going on right now. It's not about who's the best team. It's not about who has the best record. Just this week, the Bengals going into week 3 beat the Baltimore Ravens, who stomped on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then after that, followed that up by beating the Atlanta Falcons, who've got all their pieces in place, and have beat the New Orleans Hornets with Roddy White, with Julio Jones, with Stephen Jackson and those boys. Doesn't matter. The Falcons went against Cincinnati and got beat up. I don't think Cincinnati's going anywhere, but we all know they're the most talented team in the AFC North, yet you still picked the Baltimore Ravens to win the division. I picked the Steelers as a wild card.
I picked Cincinnati. I had Baltimore as a wild card, but that's okay.
Okay, got you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't even pick them to make the playoffs. I picked the Steelers, and look how that's looking right now. I'm just saying that we all know how hard I am on Marvin Lewis. 11 years, not a single playoff victory. But right now, going into week 3, the Cincinnati Bengals should be atop the power rankings.
Okay, I'm not that shocked, except that you've been so hard on Marvin Lewis, and you're waiting and seeing for the playoffs, and they need to win a playoff game, obviously.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying, but seriously, heart of hearts, is Cincinnati right now better than Seattle?
No. But going into week 3, with Cincinnati having beaten Baltimore and Atlanta, and Seattle having lost to San Diego, and San Diego looking the way that they looked against Seattle, I can't give Seattle the nod over the Bengals for the week 3 power rankings. Now, if the playoffs were to begin this week, regardless of positioning, I would pick Seattle over Cincinnati. But in terms of power rankings, going into week 3, Cincinnati deserves to be ahead of Seattle right now.
Okay, are you sure that Baltimore and/or Atlanta are really that good to measuring stick Cincinnati to the top of these power rankings? I'm not.
Well, to me, Atlanta is offensively, and Baltimore is in terms of guts, being rough riders, it being an AFC North rival. I think that supersedes what happened with Seattle against San Diego.
Stephen A. Smith. We love what you had to say, but we have more important questions. Where are you tomorrow?
I'm right here. I'm in Charlotte. I'm on my way back tomorrow.
Right here? In person? Up close and personal?
Well, if Chris Rock is coming in studio on my radio show, I'll be in New York.